Titanic will founder. But this ship can't sink.
She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will.
Well, I believe you may get your headlines, Mr. Ismay.
Prepare to lower! Ready on the left! Take them down!
All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, we've had a couple of days to digest the news, the shocking news of we're not going to do anything different.
Yeah, and I got my notes. I went through all three interviews.
Ooh, nice.
And we always say we don't want to make this too long, so we'll try not to. People keep telling us to stop saying that, so too late. Yeah, so I know you wanted to focus in on the last two interviews. So those who don't know, Mara came out and spoke first, which we were surprised because that wasn't announced. He just came out that morning and spoke, and it would seem kind of thrown together because he wasn't on in a conference room or anything like that. It was just done in the indoor practice facility. Then they rolled out Daboll after that, and then they rolled out Schoen. So John wanted to focus more on the Daboll and Schoen ones, but I do want to touch on the Mara one before we move on.
Sure.
'Cause he did say some things that I think influence the other two discussions and that are important. So if that's okay with you.
No. Hey, we're a collaborative effort here. I think that's a good idea because I re-listened to the last two again, and there were a couple things I picked up where I'm kind of like, I'm curious. So let's start with I guess we'll go kind of in chronological order.
Yeah, that would make most sense. Yeah.
Let's start with Mara.
And I won't stay too much on Mara, but there were a few things in there that I think we should emphasize because the timeline's interesting. So as you were speculating, and we didn't know, I don't think we knew at the time because we hadn't seen the transcript and really digested the interview. They did meet on Friday. So they did not meet after the game. They met on Friday. And they said it was a long sit-down meeting that Mara had with Daboll. And Schoen admitted later on he was in there as well too. So, but I think it was focused on Daboll. It's just something that's in the back of my mind too. I wonder if there's any tension now between Daboll and Schoen at this point, because I think one was more safe than the other. And you have to wonder a little bit if one might have thrown the other under the bus a little bit to save one's own neck. So I don't know if that happened. Maybe not, but I'm wondering if there's a little tension there as well. But so they did meet on Friday. They had a long meeting. And then Mara said he spoke to Tish, I'm assuming over the phone. And then they said they talked again. So the decision was made, I think, before the game. And I think he said that. I'm going to look at the exact quote. He said he spoke to Tish over the weekend, and then we came to the decision that staying with both of them is the best course of action right now. So, and he said, I liked what I heard from them on Friday afternoon. I like their plan going forward, and we're going to stay with it. But he said he wasn't going to go into the details. He wouldn't share that with the reporters. So Daboll then said, and we'll talk about Daboll.
Well, before you go to that one, I think those key words were said right there that you just read, that if you think about it now that we've heard from all three,
right,
it seems to make more sense. We've decided to bring both of them back.
Right.
The key there to me sounds like we heard before. I think it's true. I think Schoen was already locked in.
And his comments again, we're going to talk about Shane last, but Shane's comments, Shane was pretty convinced that he wasn't even at risk.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
he was
didn't seem
putting
to
on a
even be a
brave
question.
face, but
Yeah.
they asked him twice and he kind of said, "No, I was coming back." That was his attitude. Now that might be just him putting on a face, but I think that's the case too.
But notice also, we did not hear from anybody else that Mara went to Shane and told him on Monday morning, "You're coming back." But he did go to Brian Daboll and told Brian Daboll, "You're coming back." That tells me
But
the two of them were separate.
and Daboll said, and we don't know if this is true, and they pressed them, the reporters were pressed him on this, and he didn't really answer. They wanted to know, as I do, and I think you do, was Daboll told before the game he was coming
Correct.
back, or was he told after the game? He first came out and he said, "I heard this morning," which was Monday. So Daboll's first public statement was, "I heard Monday that I was coming back."
Right.
Later on, they asked him, "Well, did you know between the Friday meeting and Monday that you thought there was a good chance
Right.
to come back?"
Did you
Did
even
he wouldn't
feel like
answer
you would?
that.
Yeah.
And
Did you
he
even
wouldn't
feel
answer
like
that.
you would?
Yeah.
He was pressed by, I believe it was Paul Schwartz, because I just listened to it just a little while ago. And the question was, okay, they didn't tell you, but when you left that meeting, did you have an
Right.
inclination
Right.
that you were coming back? I listen, we met, we talked, it was a good meeting, we played the game, and I was told this morning. That's what he kept
His
saying
answers
over and over
actually
again.
weren't even remotely related to the question.
No.
We'll get to Daboll in a second, but
Yeah.
Daboll's interview was the least helpful, insightful. I got nothing out of it. There's a couple of things, but I got nothing out of it. But he basically, it was like he was on a jury stand and he wasn't going to incriminate himself, so he didn't say a damn thing. So
You got more from him. Let me rephrase that. You got less from him in that scenario than you get from Bill Belichick talking about the next week's upcoming opponent.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. So before I move on to finish up on Mara, did you want to react to the first part of that, or did you want me to move
well,
on?
I think there was stuff there now because we've heard from all three. I thought it was interesting that Mara said what he said, and then he delved further into the things that he felt needed that were going to change or that he wanted to change.
Right.
He was very open about not being happy with the defense. That is something to file away for later for the Daboll conversation.
Right.
He mentioned Daboll not calling plays. That's also very interesting when it comes up with Daboll later. There seems to be a disconnect on whose idea that was.
Yeah, you picked that up too.
Yeah. So here's my thought on all of this. I think John Mara basically came out, hastily put together a thing. I think he had already decided. I think Friday's was already decided. The meeting on Friday was probably more to lay out you tell me what you're thinking, Daboll. You tell me what you're thinking for Mara. He and Shane probably have already talked about what needs to happen.
I agree.
And then here's what needs to happen in the game. You will play other players. You won't try to lose. You can't take a kneel down. You can't call running plays on 3rd and 8. But you will play Eric Gray. You will mix in Josh Azudu. You will take guys out at different points in time.
Boogie Basham will play a ton of snaps, that kind of thing.
You cannot purposely try to lose, but not try to win all at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if he got that, if he micromanaged it to that level. I would have. I know that sounds terrible because I've been saying ownership should stay out of things, but again, you know how I feel about the whole draft thing. So I would have told him in that situation, this is how you will handle it because you're hurting us.
Sure.
But we don't know that. You were speculating at this point.
So there was a couple other things, and I want your take on this because, again, you've watched it, you've read the transcripts. What did you think about Mara talking about what he saw from the team throughout the year?
Oh, God.
Including him being at practice.
Yeah. No, that was...
All of a sudden, that became my worst nightmare in the part where I've defended before. And now I'm beginning to question myself slightly of like, Mara's not involved that much. Maybe he is.
No, and I can I have mixed feelings on that. So if you're an owner, so Tish is more of he's half owner, but he's got other things going on in his life. Mara doesn't have anything but the Giants. So if he wants to come watch practice and sit in the back I had the vision. He said he sat in on meetings, players' meetings.
So I was like,
I
oh
had
my
visions
God.
of like, when you were in school, high school, and the principal would come into the back of the office, back of the classroom, and sort of sit there and listen to the teacher while he was evaluating it. It was a little cringe at first, but I'm not going to hit him too hard on that. But what stood out to me more was when he said, so he defended, and I apologize for looking at my notes, but I
No,
want to
go
get
for it. Go,
right. I want
please.
to get this right. So before we get to that, because this is the lead into that, the I told you I gave the quote about the meeting on Friday, and he heard the plans, and they're like moving forward. And the other thing that stood out to me in the big picture before we get into what you're talking about was he emphasized that when you start over, you really set yourselves back. And this gets back to what I was talking about in earlier podcasts, that I think Mara really doesn't want to start over all over again.
Right,
He wants
right.
the continuity, and I think he was more worried about that with Shane, because he went on, and we'll talk about this. He went on and talked about how he likes the process. And when he talks about process, he's not talking about the coaching. He's talking about the scouting department, both pro and college, then the people that he brought in. So he doesn't want, and as I thought, he doesn't want to erase all that. So he doesn't want to blow up getting rid of Brandon, the assistant GM Brandon. He doesn't want to get rid of Cowden. He doesn't want to get rid of Dennis Hickey and all these other people, the other scouts and things like that they brought in. Because he said, the exact quote was this: when you make these changes, and God knows we've made them in the past and have been impatient in the past. I thought that was a key statement. And I think he looks back, right or wrong, and he thinks he's been impatient firing
Right,
other coaches.
right.
Okay. When you do that, you feel like you take one step forward, two steps back, and I just didn't want to fall into that cycle again. I wanted to give people a chance to build this thing the right way and get us where we need to be. I think when you start over, you really set yourself back. And he said, my instinct and my strong belief that we're going in the right direction. So he feels that they're going in the right direction. So then he went on and talked about why he kept Shane and why he kept Daboll. And now this gets to what you were talking about. And he said, in Brian's case, and he emphasizes he was coach of the year 2 years ago. That didn't disappear all of a sudden. I'm at practice all the time. I go to the team meetings. I watch the players and I watch how they react. I still think he's the right guy to lead us. But then later on, he contradicts himself about the play calling and the defense, the things that you talked about.
Yeah.
So what stood out, he didn't give a real long explanation on why he's keeping Daboll, but he led into it exactly what you just said. I've been in the meetings, I've been in at the practices. Me, John Mara, I know what football looks like. I know what coaching is supposed to look like, and I feel confident that, and I'm putting words in his mouth now. I feel confident Brian is capable of leading this team moving forward. That was his explanation. I know John Mara, me. I've seen coaches in the past. I think I know what it's supposed to look like, and that's why I'm comfortable with this. That's what I took away from that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you can go in a plethora of directions if you want to, really, with whatever he said based on your frame of reference. He said something at different points in time. If you're pro John Mayer,
Yes.
if you're anti John Mayer, if you're kind of meh, if you're pro Daboll, anti Daboll, there's a piece in there every single time where you could latch on and go, see, he sucks. See, he's the guy.
Right.
I thought there were a couple. I know the thing with Dominique Foxworthy was brought up. Dominique Foxworthy on ESPN brought up this thing, basically talking about how Mara needs to not be a fanboy, can't be joking around about Saquon, can't say this other stuff. That's not what an owner and a CEO of a team does. That's what you and I talked about you need to be out there, and it needs to be more of you're running a multi-billion-dollar operation.
Right.
But we are focused on the game. We're focused on the team in the game. He runs a company that makes a shit ton of money. If the Giants go 0-17 next year, I guarantee you they make just as much money as they did this year, because there's merchandise that's already been sold. Anybody who goes to the game from other teams, you're buying concessions, you're buying stuff there.
PSL,
Parking, all that other crap. He's going to run concerts.
Well, the
biggie
is he's got his portion of the TV contract. That's
absolutely. Well, that too, okay. But you also have you got stadium revenue from other stuff. I mean, the Giants' results on the field are not going to hurt his bottom line per se.
Right.
But his image took a hit. Now, I'll say this. Everybody on BBI, BigBlueInteractive.com, and any other Giants fans out there who are listening to us, who I hope there's plenty of you, you got to stop bashing John Mara on the one thing that he said that I think you're all grasping onto for the wrong reasons. He said, we will never play to lose. We will always try to win. And if I find out anybody did purposely lost, I would fire them. He can't say anything different. He's on the competition committee. The NFL does not want anybody thinking teams take. They know it's out there.
Right.
And now the Bengals have stirred the pot, by the way, when Taylor came out today, and he's accusing the Chiefs of intentionally losing.
And this is going to be a problem for the NFL moving forward.
Absolutely.
There was an interesting tweet on Sunday that one of the pundits, one of the national reporters said, why does week 18 now feel like we're watching the third preseason game, and it's third preseason week? And that's going to be a problem for the NFL moving forward, because more and more teams are tanking, whether you want to use that word or not, but sitting their starters and not putting their full effort. And that's going to start influencing things like the gambling community. And so it's a very sensitive subject, and that's a whole other conversation. But yes, you're 100%. And we talked about in the last podcast, he can't come out, and especially since he's the head of the competition committee, he can't come out and say that. So yes. But if you look at the snap counts came out after the game, and we didn't see them before we did our last podcast. It's pretty clear that the Giants weren't going all out to win that game. When you look at who was playing, especially on defense, they didn't mind losing that game. What still bothers the crap out of me that they won the Colts game. I mean,
that's a whole nother conversation to talk about in a second. But I want to say this, because it also came up. Well, why were the snap counts? Why are they playing these guys on offense and whatever? You can hide what you're doing on offense because you have the ball far easier than you can on defense. On defense, if you start having guys like Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, and if Dexter Lawrence were playing, great, but he's not. But I'm trying to think of anybody else who's good. We don't really have that many good players. If you start telling them, hey, kind of take it easy, run to your side, just kind of, that's obvious. Then we're going to look like we got, 11 Deonte Banks out there. So you can't just do that. So what do? Well, we're going to get other guys playing time. Tom and Fox is going to play.
All right.
Burns is out. Kayvon, you're out. Boogie Basham, you come on in there. We're going to rotate the guys. We're going to rotate.
They had a lot of different corners playing, guys that were on that you were like, who the hell is that? So the only thing, the one fly in the ointment, it goes back to the Colts and it goes back to this game and I think it gets back to your earlier comment, was Malik Neighbors. And I would have not have played him against the Colts, and I would not have played him as much as they did against the Eagles. But I think this gets back to your earlier comment that he's tougher to control, and they're managing that a little bit. So in other words, and he was going for a record, and
I think that's part of it. It comes up in another in the Brian Daboll press conference. So when we get there, we'll come back to this. But there is a question specifically asked by I believe it was Jordan Renan, but if it's not, forgive me. But it was basically stuff he heard from other players, and it presents it to Daboll as a question, and Daboll just basically ignores it and moves on. But it ties directly to what we're talking about right now. And I think Neighbors, they were doing everything possible to appease that ego.
That's what I think now. When you originally said that the other day, I was like, maybe, I don't know. But now I really think so, because, again, he's the one guy that could have wrecked the game again. He wrecked the game against the Colts. He turned a loss into a win, and he could have done it against the Eagles. I mean, the only touchdown we scored was him making an incredible play again. So at that point, I was like, I was feeling pretty good about the loss up to that point. Then he makes that play, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, stop it. Get him out of the game.
So, for this weird record that doesn't mean anything, because there's a guy later in the day who was already at that number, had just pushed right past it anyway. And honestly, do you care? Do you care that Puka Nacua had a record a year? I mean, in today's NFL of throwing passes, I don't care. Neighbors had a shit ton of receptions in a season we won 3 games.
Records mean more to me when you're winning because I think it's cool. So if the Giants were winning and like say like we have the thing of Brandon Jacobs here, or you can also say he's Rodney Hampton here, but when they were winning and they were getting records about breaking records and things like that, I was like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Giants. Woo! Now I'm like, I don't care. We're 3-14 and somebody broke a record. I don't care.
Do you know who has the rookie record for field goals in a season?
Is it Ali Haji?
Had it. Right. What year was that?
That was 1983.
1983. We won 3 games. Who cares?
Who cares? Who cares?
And he was off the team like 2 years later. So who cares?
So Larry, if you're listening out there, I got that right. I got that hockey sheet question right. All right. So let's finish up on Mara because I want to get to the other ones. But so he talked about a brief defense of Daboll. Didn't really get into it. And in Joe Schoen's case, he said he kept emphasizing he had an outstanding draft. Now, he didn't mention 2022 draft. He didn't mention the 2023 draft. He kept coming back to 2024. And he thought he had an outstanding free agency period. Now, he threw Burns in there. Burns was a trade. But he talked about Burns and Runyon. And then those are the only 2 names he mentioned. And then he talked about, again, the staff that he put together. And I think the staff that he's assembled around him and the process, this magical process that we go through now and the information that we have in making personnel decisions is better than I have ever seen it before. But then he later goes on and says, I'm not sure. He said, direct this as a quote. I'm not sure I am all that confident that it's that much better. He said that the roster. So he basically later on said, I'm not sure the roster's gotten any better since when they got here, but I think the process is good. So I re-listening to this and watching this again, I think right or wrong. Now we may be doing a show a year from now, and this actually might have been the right thing to do. I don't think we're going to be having a winning record a year from now, but if they do, we'll have to look back and say, John Mara was brave in the sense that he did something that a lot of people didn't want him to do and bring back both these guys, and it worked out for them. But if it doesn't work out, again, he's going to take a lot of heat for this. So in one way, I want to give him some credit here. He did the unpopular decision. But you could also argue, on the other hand, he did the kind of a more lazy decision in that he didn't, we all know this, and everyone falls victim of this sometimes. Sometimes your decisions are so tough that instead of doing what you need to do, you sometimes do nothing. So you're like, sometimes people panic or are blind or are so confused that they won't do anything. They'll just do nothing. So you can almost wonder, is he doing the right thing here because he is right, or is he doing this because he just doesn't want to make a change again? So I don't know.
I think it's a valid question. I try to take the emotion side of it out, which is not easy for me. I mean, I get very like, you can all go. Once you've made and this is where I think it's at. So there's a couple things, and when we get to Schoen, we could talk about this a little bit further. That whole idea with the process, which, by the way, it's also like unicorns, and I don't know.
Stop using that word.
I don't even know what it means. I'm like where? But
what process?
But I do think I know where it starts. Because there was a question posed to Schoen that talked about if you could go back to 22 and 23 with the staff you have now and the process in place, could you see things differently? And he answers it, but doesn't really answer it. But he talks about the fact that, we now feel really good with, and then he labels each one of the guys. Dennis Hickey talks about Brown. I'm trying to remember the other guy's name, but he goes through all those.
Brown.
Cowden, thank you.
Dennis Hickey, yeah.
Yeah. So he's talking about their experiences, where all this stuff that they have now and what they all are working together on.
And to be fair to him, that's correct. In other words, if you feel like you brought in these people that you think have value, you don't, and you're still building that up. He talked about how he wasn't able to do that in year one, and we can get into that why you can't do that. But he legitimately they couldn't do that in year one, but he did it year 2 and 3. So that isn't actually an intelligent response. We've built this thing and we don't want to blow it up. But sorry to interrupt you. So
no, you're fine.
It's not a bad answer.
So I think from where we can kind of land with Mara, we talked about this. It was literally like, it was like somebody with split personality gave one answer and then literally gave So I think his mind matching fans started to answer back, well, I don't know, about the talent needs to be better, but you just said. So I understand that maybe when you do things unscripted, and by the way, we do all this unscripted, but when you do things unscripted and that's not your wheelhouse, then you run the risk of saying stuff that you probably wouldn't normally just let out in this kind of a setting, because you're just not prepared for how you were going to say it. I think he let us know some of the real truths. Here's the real thing in my vision, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong. I think he knew Schoen was coming back. I think that was already discussed. I think the fact that the Colts game happened and we didn't hear anything about Daboll at that point, that may have turned the tide slightly back in his favor, that the players were still really trying for him.
Yeah.
Because again, Mara doesn't want to lose, and it was the only home game we won, so he's kind of like, win a home game. But then they had the meeting before the game. What would be the purpose of meeting before the game unless at least one of the two people were already coming back? Because there's no reason to meet with both of them if you're still trying to decide, because there's nothing about the game that's going to change Joe Schoen's position.
Yeah, I think he already made the decision.
Yeah.
Joe Schoen was coming back. Now, to answer your question, there was an interesting comment by Giant Grit from the website, who is one of the asshats. There were several that had heard earlier. Doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean their sources are right. But had heard earlier that Schoen was coming back and Daboll was leaving. And so I think he was reacting to some of that. Other people saying, well, you were wrong. You didn't get this right. And so he's got self-interest in giving this explanation. But there may be some truth to it, too, because the reporters kind of were starting to say that, too. Like the Dan Dugans of the world were kind of saying, the vibe had switched. Giant Grit said this. And I think he's speculating here, but this kind of makes you wonder and worry a little bit. He said maybe that the vibe they were getting around the league was that top coaching prospects didn't want to come here to work with Schoen. In other words, he didn't want to be tied to Schoen. They would come be more interested in the Giants if they were starting all over again with a GM that they were more comfortable working with. Now, I'm not saying that happened. I'm not saying
No.
That is a possibility too. One of the reasons Daboll's coming back is in the back of ownership's mind. They may have said, we're not confident we can get somebody better than Daboll, which is not a good look.
No, but that's also, just to be clear though, that's not necessarily a 100% dig at Schoen. What it is saying is, you've got a lame duck GM then. I'm coming in and he's already on thin ice. What am I supposed to do in 1 year? And if it goes bad, am I staying and the GM goes? But then you get a new GM who wants his own coach.
It could be that he doesn't like Schoen, but it could also be exactly what if it isn't, the other situation which you just described exists no matter what.
Right. It's a no-win scenario for that guy coming in.
So now this could still all work out for the Giants. I don't think it's going to, but this could still all work out with the Giants. Because remember, Bill Parcells was on thin ice, and he barely came back, and then that got all completely turned around. Tom Coughlin was on thin ice after 2006, and that turned all around. So there is an opportunity here. He's getting it. When you get another swing at the ball, you can hit a home run. Do I think it's going to happen based on the schedule that's coming up? I know you don't like looking at the schedule.
No, that's fine.
I do. I don't think it's going to happen, but this could still work out. But I'm starting to think there might be something to what Giant Grit said, because it makes sense and it falls in line with what you're talking about. Is why would somebody want to be tied to a lame duck situation too? So just putting that out there. So that's also another possibility. But I do agree with what you just said. I think Schoen knew he was safe. If he wasn't safe, why would he have been in the meeting anyways on Friday when it was focused on Daboll? It wasn't a Schoen Daboll meeting. It was a Daboll meeting that Schoen also was in the meeting. So, and that's at least that's how it was couched.
And think about it. Like, why would you have that meeting on Friday before a Sunday game at the last week of the season? You can have it on Black Friday or Black Monday if you want to clean house. This was clearly designed to be like, here's a couple things. First off, sell me on why you should come back. And then how is the game going to be handled? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. How are you handling the game this Sunday?
Right, and and it was contrary to what the national reporters had been reporting that that meeting was going to happen after the game. So we
Right.
had a number of national reporters saying what happened on Friday was going to happen after the game. It actually happened before the game, which is significant. So
Right. Oh, absolutely.
so I want to throw this out here too. So I've been tweeting more, using X more for thoughts, and I when this came out, I tweeted out a couple things, my negative and initial emotional things, and somebody responded going, "Are we going to dwell on all this all winter? Why are we talking about this? Because this is really important. First of all,
It
it
just
just came
happened.
out. It's just happened, number one. But number two, this is going to determine the direction of the franchise for the foreseeable future. We have to talk about
What
this.
did you want to talk about? The season's been over for, I don't know, for us for 3 days.
It's some fans don't want they want to cover their head, and they don't want to even, I know, I get it, that you love the Giants and you don't like the bad mouthing them, but you've got to, if we're analyzing the situation, and we got to talk about it. So anyways.
With that in mind, do we have anything else specific about
No.
Mara?
No. Oh, one last thing, because it ties specifically into thing. But that was my takeaway from the Mara thing. Again, the big thing was the timeline, and then he doesn't want to blow up the process. And the process, I mean, is that the personnel structure to acquire talent. And I'm getting the sense, and again, I agree with you that Shane was coming back no matter what. And I wonder if what the motivation to bring back Daboll now was, maybe they just felt they couldn't do anything else right now. But anyways, the last thing is the quarterback. He did say that, and this is the quote, that obviously the number one issue for us going into the offseason is to find our quarterback of the future. Whether that be via the draft or acquiring a veteran, it's going to be up to them to decide ultimately. So he's setting up the owner of the Giants, who has his hands in this, and he's not saying anything that we all don't know, but he's saying we got to get a quarterback, and it doesn't have to be a draft pick. It can be a veteran. And that ties into what Shane talks about later on.
Yes, and when we get to him, we can definitely delve into that. I think that is the missing piece to what we've wondered all along. Somewhere along the way, through Hard Knocks, we saw it very clearly. Shane and Daboll were not on board with Daniel Jones coming back again and putting their eggs in that basket and thinking we're going to win.
And Shane confirmed that, and we'll get to that. But Shane confirmed that in his thing.
Yes, and in the way he said it was very interesting too.
Yes,
so
it
when
was.
we get there,
Yes, it was.
It seems to me the clear divide here became, if you say process, right, and that's what they keep throwing out there. If you say believe in the process, now I see what happened in the draft a little bit. Go Terps, you're not going to like this. The first three quarterbacks were clearly ranked up top. They were up top with anybody. Williams, Daniels, May. They were up top with any other prospect in the draft. They were right up there. Penix, McCarthy, Nix were down below, mixed in with other players. Once they agreed that if you can't get one of those three guys, and that's kind of where I think this was. I think Mara said, fine, if you can get them, I don't want to give away the farm, but that locked you into those three guys, and you knew they weren't going to, none of those teams above were going to drop. So that basically, now that leaves them to the process. Now you got to take the best player, which I think is stupid. You should have traded if that was the case. You should have traded down and acquired more picks and got other players and a potential quarterback, but that's, hindsight. But that to me says that told us everything. And then they said, run with Jones. You made it before, give him more players and see what you can do. And they ran it as far as they were going to be able to go.
Yeah, the open question is, there's two things. One is, and we'll get into this with your instincts were correct about the veteran. We'll get into that. So the veteran thing, but what you said, what we don't know is how much say did Mara have in the quarterback discussion in the 2024 draft? So did he have that? Did he say that, or did he not? We'll never know. We'll never know. But regardless, we know the outcome. The outcome was, and we saw a clip of it when they discussed the board. Those three quarterbacks weren't in their top 12, whatever it was. Again, they would have taken.
Right.
Again, the funny thing is the non-quarterback players, they seem to be able to evaluate because the guys that they were talking about um, in the
Bowers.
first round
Yep.
and even in the second round ended up being really good players. So they can evaluate these guys, it seems like. They just didn't get their hands on them. Now, everyone is throwing out Knicks still, as they should, because when you watch Knicks now, you're like, damn it. But nobody really was talking about Knicks in the Giant fan. He was mentioned as the sixth guy, and some people thought he might be better, but most people weren't saying Knicks is. So there's a little revisionism going on with Knicks right now. That's the problem with evaluating quarterbacks. Some of these guys just end up being, and we'll have to see what Knicks is 5 years from now, but some of these guys are way better pros than you thought they were going to be, or the opposite's true. And the NFL has as much trouble evaluating that stuff now. But right now, in hindsight, taking Knicks at 6 would have been a good move. It looks like.
We say that and we think that.
Right. But
no
sometimes
one
was saying that.
Well, sometimes it's the system and the matchup and the coach. Knicks was as close to Drew Brees, like physically, kind of the way he plays and
the way
Peyton,
he processes. Yes,
and Peyton, everybody kind of matched. If Knicks goes early, it's probably going to be to Peyton and the Broncos.
Oh, everyone had him tied to them. That was one of the worst kept secrets into the draft. Everyone tied Denver with Knicks.
And I didn't hear anybody else really being attached to him in the first round.
No. But I have to tell you, I'd
rather have him than what we had.
I have Knicks right now.
I agree.
So let's move on. We're done with Mara, but the Mara stuff's important.
Yes.
And I don't have much to say on Daboll because Daboll didn't say Daboll said jack shit. So you start off, but
let's because we're gonna go chronologically. Daboll was next.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. A couple things. They asked him a bunch of questions, and he is fucking annoying. I know it's not that you don't answer because every coach doesn't answer. It's that you argumentatively don't answer. Oh, the season just ended. We haven't even had bullshit. You just met with the owner on Friday. You had to lay out a plan. It was mentioned, of course, your ego says, I presented to him that I might not call plays. Later, they bring it back up to Daboll. Well, John said I don't know if he said it first, but I offered it. I kind of feel like it was laid out there like, I don't see you calling plays. I don't have to call plays. If you want to call that you offered it, sure. You did whatever you had to prove that you should come back. Right. Most of his answers, he totally dodged the Daniel Jones one.
It's not good enough. We only won 3 games. We're going to work harder. It
starts with me. I got to coach better.
After every single question, he made the same goddamn answer. Look, most coaches, almost all of them, hate meeting with the media. Hate meeting with them. Tom Coughlin hated meeting with the media, but he did it, and he was actually as brusque and sometimes pissy as he was with the media. He provided answers. Daboll's answers, again, this isn't a huge thing with me because it's PR. If you win, I don't care. The problem is he's losing. He's losing. So, but it just doesn't look like he gives a shit. So his answers aren't even like he's trying. He doesn't even look like he's trying to answer the questions.
But this is after the season. This isn't like, hey, you just lost this game. Well, what happened there? What do you think of him? He dropped the ball. This is after the season where part of what you just said is, I was informed today by John Mara that I'm coming back. No. Let me rephrase that. I was informed by John Mara we're allowed to come back.
Have you noticed one of his tricks, and he's done this for a few years now, is to tell people, this is not a good time to talk about it. I'll talk about it in the future. And then when the reporter brings it up in the future, he says again, it's not a good time to talk about it. So he just did it. So one of the reporters called him out on it at the end. He said, you told me the last time we met that this would not be a good time to talk about it because the season was still, well, now that the season's over, can you answer the question now? And he was basically saying, well, the season just ended and I don't want to talk about it. So when are you going to answer the goddamn question? He's not going to answer the goddamn question.
I'm trying to remember. There was one specific question that really got the exit interviews. You're doing exit interviews this year. You didn't do them last year. Well, because we felt we should. So did you think you made a mistake last year? No, we just didn't do them last year, but we think we're trying everything different. We're just going to do everything different.
Did you see Ryan Dunleavy's theory on that?
No, I did not. What did he say?
He thought that had to do with Wink. In other words,
I agree. For last year,
he didn't want to meet with the defensive players because there were still raw emotion there. And I think that's a good theory. So we're speculating, but
they asked him very specifically. The defense did not play well this year. You changed the defense coordinator, changed the special teams coach. It would be hard to do it again. He's like, listen, we only won 3 games. Nothing was good enough. We're going to reevaluate. Yeah. I have total confidence in those guys. Next question. Yeah. The owner came out and said he's not happy with it. He's like, listen, we
won 3 games.
Nobody's happy. We're going to talk about things. I'm like, what the fuck? Come on.
What I talked about with John is private. I'm not going to talk about.
So I guarantee you, when John sat there and said, this defense sucks, we are a team of defense and we were so bad, you got to do something. Okay, I'll change coordinators. What that's coming. Bowen is out. And here's how you know.
I hope he wouldn't throw him under the bus, which he wouldn't, but
here's how you know. Who started their podcast earlier today talking about him in a very negative way? Banks criticized them.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't listen to it. I just saw the headline and I thought,
yeah. Giant Central. Here's your script.
But again, I don't want to. People on X are going to get mad at me. Why am I being so negative, Eric? Who's going to want to come here that's any good? In a lame duck situation,
I still think it's Lou Amarul. I think
if you're coming up with a list of who's on the hot seat going into 2025, Brian Daboll's got to be at the top of the list.
Oh, sure,
yeah,
sure,
top of the list. So I know Lou, you want Lou.
I don't have a big penchant for him.
What about Antonio Pierce? Bring back Antonio.
I do not want Antonio Pierce. I think Antonio Pierce is extremely overrated for what he's done. I
know, but it's the connection.
Oh, it is. But I mean, listen, they've got to win. I don't give a shit what they said about
They're not going to win next year, John.
There is a pathway. There's a pathway to get there, and you'll know that they're trying if they do it. And that pathway is we're going veteran quarterback, and it might be an older veteran quarterback.
Oh, we'll get there. I think they're going to go veteran now.
Yes.
I do think they're going to go veteran. So, and that gets into kind of what Cy was talking about. Maybe we want to have Cy come on and explain his detailed off-season plan because he had some good stuff in there, but some controversial stuff. So
was there anything else for Daboll for you?
No. The only thing I got out of that was he claims he only found out on that morning, which I'm not sure I believe, but that's what he claims. And then the only other thing I got out of that is I thought that this was a good answer by him. This is the only good answer he gave when somebody asked him if he was on the hot seat. He said the NFL usually is a 1-year deal anyway, and he's right about that. That was the only good answer he gave. In terms of, everybody's got a 1-year, deal.
It's the NFL, not for long.
And the other thing, the last thing was the thing that I already brought up. He said they kept pressing him. I think twice they pressed him on when were you told you were going to come back, or when did you feel you were going to come back before Friday and Monday? Was there anything, because the way you handled the game seemed to suggest you knew you were coming back, and they wanted him to answer that, and he wouldn't answer that.
Well, they asked him blatantly, did you try to win the game on Sunday?
And he didn't give an answer. And
he said, yes, we tried to win.
But
he goes, we went for it on 4th down. We did this. I'm like, fourth down.
Yeah. He mentioned your punt, your fake punt.
Yeah, you telegraphed that so much that I thought for sure you were intentionally calling a fake punt to the run to get tackled for a loss.
Yeah.
He said that, but then they asked him about your usage of players. He said some of the players have kind of said to us it kind of felt like a preseason game with the way he's like, well, we were looking ahead to the future. If you're looking ahead to the future, trying to get guys playing time, trying to see how them on the field, doesn't that mean you're coming back? Why would you do that if you weren't?
Now, question for you: what did you think of his demeanor? Not his question.
No. It's the way he looked, the way he acted. He knows he's
happy, sad.
I think he knows he's effed if they don't win, and I don't know that he's confident in himself that he can get them there. That's how I feel. He was off-putting in a way to the questions. He was almost, he was borderline obstinate on a
Yes.
number of things in a portion of where you should be kind of like, hey man, I'm really grateful to be coming back. I know it hasn't been away.
Yeah, all right. You got the same vibe I
Yeah.
did. Yes.
Yeah.
He didn't seem grateful to be coming. I always sometimes wonder, does he really even want to be here anymore? I don't.
Did you hear the question that was asked of him? How is it? Is it an honor and a privilege to be the Giants coach and whatever?
Yeah.
Is that Art Stapleton? There were two questions that sounded like it was Art, and they were like, "Here you go."
I don't know.
I'm like, they're such bullshit questions. I'm like, come on,
ask
a real question.
I don't know. I don't know. But I was curious to see what your impression was on his demeanor. I thought Mara was kind of almost embarrassed. You know, his demeanor was he was very low key, and you know, he got a little irritated at times, but he was kind of like, you know, I had to turn my volume way up to hear him. And I thought, like you said, I didn't think Daboll had the right demeanor either. But I was curious to what you said.
Yeah, no, I think no, I think you're right. I mean, I felt the same way watching him. If you just read the transcript, you're just getting the questions and the answer. But when you watch it, you watch the way he is. He's annoyed, which is fine. I can understand that. But you went 9-6-3 in wins, and you get to come back in a job.
You'll be thanking your lucky stars you're coming back, dude.
You should be thrilled, and knowing he did mention the quarterback thing, although he stayed away from Jones, but that it's important that they find one.
Yeah.
Whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a veteran, you know, we gotta, you know, but we all got to be better. And then he just walked away from it.
Yeah. All right. So that's with Daboll. We're done with Daboll. Now let's move to Schoen. So what did you want to start off with him? So I got a few comments, but what did you want to start?
I want to start with you because I want to see what you think first. So I've always been a little bit more in the Schoen group than I was the Daboll group.
Yeah.
So what do you got?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for your question. Oh, okay. So on rewatching it again, I'm going to make some people mad because people were on when I announced that we were going to be doing this tonight, and people were like, "Give them hell, give them hell."
Oh, I know. I saw that.
When I went back and looked through all of these again, they're not good, but they're not as bad as I initially thought. Because part of me is I'm still pissed. Okay, so I'm not defending these conferences, but they're not as bad as I thought. So the first thing he came out and said was he did blame himself.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a part in here that we'll get to, but so he said, first and foremost, he said, myself, we're not good enough. I've got to do a better job of assembling a roster with more talent.
Right. That's on me. Yep, that's on me.
It's on me. However, later on, when he was asked if he could go back and redo the Daniel Jones situation, he wouldn't admit to it. So
I saw that
whether he really believes he's at fault or not, I don't know. It's one thing to say in general, yeah, I'm to blame, but when you press somebody on it, but you really screwed up on that, didn't you? Oh no, I didn't screw up on that. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing, given the information we had at the time. My reaction is, you know what? I really screwed that up, and somebody pushed back on Twitter on me about saying he can't throw Daniel Jones under the bus. I don't care about Daniel Jones being thrown under the bus at this point. He's a Viking. I don't care.
He had no problem. He blatantly talked about how they need a quarterback, and the quarterback play wasn't good enough. He threw Daniel Jones under the bus constantly. What he didn't throw under the bus was the influence of why that contract happened the way that it happened, is what I think.
Well, that's a whole. You and I have talked about that over and over again. But yeah, so first of all, he did that, and then again, he was asked about quarterback is the most important position in football. We'll look at free agency, and this is really key. We can also look throughout the draft and potential trade opportunities. So I think, and you and I have talked about this, it would not shock me if the next quarterback of the New York Giants is a trade. So
I absolutely think it is.
Unless they go the Justin Fields type route, and that's not a good. That's just a wing and a prayer at that point. I again wonder if they were pursue somebody like Matthew Stafford or somebody like that. And then this ties into that about it. This is where I want to spend much of what we're talking about, because I'm glad they asked this. By the way, reporters, you did actually ask some really good questions. I will give them all three. Some of the guys did ask good questions. He was pressed on, are you going to do a Hail Mary? And the thing that we talked about, are you, because you're on the hot seat, are you going to do something desperate here that's going to screw the? Now he's not going to admit. My job's online. I'm going to do whatever. He's never going to admit that. But he's on notice, if that means anything. He's on notice. The organization has to know that everyone's thinking about this right now. So that came out, and he said, he kept talking about they are in a decent situation because they have the high draft pick, but they have cap room. I don't think 40 million. That's even less than you and I were talking. We're talking about 60 million. 40 million is not a lot. And then he said, I would never do that. I'm not going to do a Hail Mary for self-preservation. We have a plan in place that we believe in, and we're going to stick with that. So they have a idea of what they're going to do, and they're going to stick with it. Now, that part I do believe. I think they have a concept already, and we'll get into it, but I think he admitted in this, the most important thing that came out of this to me, and I will read the quote later, is he admitted that they knew the Daniel Jones thing could go sideways. He didn't say it specifically. He danced around it, but there were two answers where he basically said, we had a parallel process. We had in mind that, we wanted to, you and I talked about this. They were going to try to surround Daniel Jones with weapons and see how, and that's what they said in Hard Knocks, and he said it here too, see how that worked out. And if it didn't work out, we have another plan. And that's what he admitted to. So he confirmed what you and I were kind of talking about all the last few months. To me, that was the most important thing that came out.
Absolutely. And the way he said it, I believe, and you might have the transcript, but something to the effect of, we were going to try to go as far as we could go with Daniel, and it didn't work out. So that was
the bye week. Again, the bye week, I think, was the break.
But I think the edict all along was we're going to get other players, get him back to 22, see if you can win that way, because we can't go and get some of these other quarterbacks. That's breaking your process. I think that's what happened.
Right.
Again, speculation for sure. Does that make it okay? No. Sometimes you have to reach, but if they stick to their process, I get it. He mentioned something else, though, that's very important, very key. In their study of the draft, they were studying quarterbacks not just in the draft last year, but also following years. They were looking at, he goes, we already have done extensive work. But that also is backwards too. And this is where I kind of think that we might want to really keep an eye on this, because of the relationship that's out there and the fact that where we are could still leave open a spot where a quarterback is available at our pick. If only one of the two main quarterbacks go in the top three, and let's say Ward is the guy that goes.
Right.
I'm not buying that the Giants are sold on Sanders. In fact, there was something that he said made me think they're not. If you can flop with Carolina, who needs a splash, and we take Bryce Young off their hands, they get our pick here. I could see that happening. I could easily see that happening. I have a feeling
that Bryce Young's going to, and I've said this for a while, I have a feeling Bryce Young's on our radar.
I think so too, and it was just the way they emphasized trade multiple times. Shane said it, Mara said it,
and this gets back to you about
Daboll, I think
Daboll
even said it.
And evaluating quarterback. Again, I'm not advocating it. Before somebody goes out there, Bryce Young, we're not advocating for it. But the reality of the situation is the Giants are in quarterback hell. They've got to get a quarterback in this draft, and the problem with that is the GM and the head coach got to win, especially the head coach. The GM, maybe he gets more years, but Daboll's dog meat unless he gets a veteran or a guy that is a rookie is like Jaden Daniels, and I don't think most rookies don't do that. So that's why John and to a lesser extent me have been saying they may have to go to a veteran for the self-preservation mode. Doesn't mean they don't draft a quarterback too, but they've got to have somebody.
Exactly.
All right. So So a Kurt Warner for your Eli Manning type thing, that type of
Sure.
situation.
Or Kerry
So-
Collins back in the day when we kind of got him on a flyer when we already had Brown and Graham.
Right.
They picked up Collins.
I think they've got to bring in. I think they got to bring in. And so the question is, where do you get the quarterback? And it's not. None of the answers are pretty right now. So again, the NFL's got about 5 quarterbacks right now that are playing way above everybody else, and because they're playing way above anybody else, those teams have a legitimate shot at the Super Bowl. Then you got the Eagles, who have people have different opinion on Jalen Hurts, but the rest of the roster is really good. But that's where we're at right now. Is they don't even have a quarterback that even can keep them around 500 football right now. If Daboll goes 500 next year, he's coming back, and that's what he's thinking right now. I've got to find something. I need a quarterback so I can survive another year. Yes. So that's the big thing I got out of that was what you just said.
So Schoen, I felt like a couple things that he talked about, the process piece, what they have to get better on, talked about the quarterback, emphasized the fact that it could be trade. In fact, trade really stood out to me the way that was said multiple times.
Yes.
Free agency, it's a little harder unless guys get cut.
Right.
Rodgers, Cousins, whatever. Other than that, they're not technically free agents. So the free agent pool is piss poor at best. So you got a feeling that's where they're going to go. They got to go veteran because they have to win. I'm not saying they have to win 10 games or 11 games, but they do need to be winning and competitive, and it's got to look like you've got enough in place that you can get a quarterback next year, which is why I feel like a trade and I don't want to focus on that because it's about the conferences, but that stood out to me. The relationship that Schoen has with Morgan in Carolina, I just think keep an eye on that one. Even though I do think a vet free agent who's not currently a free agent, but he will be, I think is somebody we're going to have to watch, and everybody's going to hate it. I'm sorry, but I think keep an eye on Aaron Rodgers and what happens there. He's going to choose somewhere.
I saw somebody else mention that too. So you think Aaron Rodgers?
I think because a couple of things. One, he hinted something about New York earlier in the year, but that could be nothing. The other thing is he threw 28 touchdown passes this year to 11 interceptions on a team that was pretty shitty. In a year, he didn't look that great.
Yeah.
What could he do in a Daboll offense that just wants a guy to pick the right guy when you go to throw the ball? So I asked a question, and I'll just ask you this. I know I'm kind of delving off topic real quick.
Yeah.
Knowing what we saw of Rodgers this year with the Jets, if you had put him in place from day one, so he was quarterback starting against the Vikings instead of Daniel Jones, do we win 7, maybe 8 games, even with the roster that we had with him at quarterback?
We would definitely have a decent shot at it. Again, the problem is it's the roster at the end of the year was nowhere near what the roster was at the beginning of the year. People forget that the offense, and Schoen talked about it too. The offensive line in the first 6 or 7 games before Andrew Thomas got hurt was actually pretty decent. Probably you could make the argument was one of the better ones, and from a pass protection standpoint, especially one of the better ones in the NFL. And he's got the receivers, and so yeah, I would think there were games where again we just weren't scoring points. The problem we have too is the defense wasn't good.
But
it's tough to win games when your defense is
But again, using what we know, what already happened.
I will say this: the offensive certainly wouldn't have been bottom ranked. I don't think we would have been a bottom.
But I mean, we could have beaten Dallas. We were in that game even with Jones. We could have beaten the Bengals.
Again, we were averaging 14, 15 points a game. So I don't think we do that with Rodgers.
And with a guy who can be quick, that's the other thing. So Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, somebody who can be quick to throw the ball, right? They snap the throw off. Jones, we always said, was very long and mechanical in the way he throws. He opens himself up to taking big hits because he can't get rid of it fast. There's a big process that happens when he throws. A guy like Rodgers, a guy like Stafford, they can just throw off target. They can look one way, throw it another. They're very quick. They change the angles of their arms. They make the offensive line actually better than it is. The Rams had more injuries on the offensive line early on than we did. They were playing third string guys in the game against the Vikings, and they still won.
Yeah.
So, and that's the game that cost us Stafford probably too.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems to me there's a lot of baggage right now with Rodgers. I don't know.
I agree. but our
And
options are
that,
limited.
no, I know, I agree. That's what I'm saying. People, that's the problem is people, when you throw names out, when you throw specifics, people always like generalities, but when you throw
Sure.
out specifics, they're like, no, no, no. And that's the problem. You know, I've done this with people before and they'll complain about something and I'll say, all right, then give me your answer. And they can't. And that's the issue at quarterback, right? None of the answers right now are really good. The best answer is this is somehow the best that this draft has a quarterback who's going to be a stud and somehow the Giants acquire him. That's the best answer. The problem is that quarterback exists in the draft and can we even have a shot at him at number 3? And I don't feel like trading away future picks for somebody you're not completely 100% sure on. So I've told you before, my big fear is they'll trade away next year's pick for Sanders to move up and draft Sanders, and then that pick ends up being like the team that gets that, say Cleveland swaps with us and gets our number 1, and next year Cleveland's using our pick to take Archie Manning.
Sure.
And
The
I
hard,
go,
the harder,
like,
the,
you gotta be
the,
kidding me. So
the Giants and a whole bunch of other teams, and then I want to get back to stuff Shane said.
yeah, let's
finish especially since you brought up the salary. The Giants and all the other teams right now currently looking for quarterbacks have one very big change in the landscape of scouting and the draft, and that is the whole NIL thing, which is now getting guys to rethink, oh, maybe I'll stay in school. I'm getting paid. And you don't even know. Right now, we can project, oh, there's going to be a better quarterback class. We don't know.
You don't know. You don't know. And you don't know who's going to tear an ACL. You don't know who's going to have a bad season.
Exactly.
I mean, look at Beck. I mean,
he
Beck
was
Beck
consensus
was
number
supposed
one.
to be, yeah. I mean, that's why you just can't. And again, and I've said all along, you can tank a couple of games. You can't tank 17 games either. That's impossible.
No.
You can't do that. So
and yeah. So one thing you mentioned, and I want to go back because this is the only thing that I actually was pretty, I don't want to say anti, but I certainly felt like it was overinflated. It might be a little hyperbole here. You start saying, well, we've got this much cap space. First off, we are 16th in cap space for 2025, and we have no quarterback. So you're not doing a great job.
no, I thought the number was better than he kept throwing out 40 million. That's not good with no
according to Over the Cap, our cap space is 53 million, but the effective cap space is 38. So I'm assuming use 53 as the number, but that still puts us 16th.
With no quarterback, and again, we have a lot of guys that are going to be up for free agency. So again, you have to fill out the roster. That's not a great number. Now he did emphasize
2026
the 100 million for the following year. So if we did acquire a expensive quarterback, it would be more
absorbed
of the salary
later
in the following year. So
which is fine. See, this is the other part that I didn't like. That's fine to say it, and you can sound like you're doing a spectacularly great job. But the Raiders, the Chargers, the Bengals, the Seahawks, the Panthers, the Commanders, the Steelers all have more cap space than us in 2026.
Yeah.
Well, the Chargers have their quarterback. The Bengals have their quarterback. The Commanders have their quarterback. So there's a bunch of teams there with a shit ton of cap space and their quarterback. We don't have a quarterback. We also have a very expensive left tackle that now has an injury history.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a right tackle that we're probably not picking up his 5th-year option. So either he moves to guard and then we re-sign him next year to a different kind of deal, or we're back in the market for more offensive linemen, which I think we are anyway. So it's a little disingenuous. It's
how the hell do we have? Why are we always up against the cap?
That's what
I mean.
I wanted to ask you
like
that.
I don't know.
I mean, what is it that we do?
I don't know.
That other teams
I don't know.
seem to be better at. Now,
know.
The Raiders I can get. If you look at the Raiders roster, the bulk of their players are getting minimal salaries overall. But also, they don't have a quarterback either. But the Chargers, they got rid of a bunch, but they still have Herbert's really expensive. Bosa's really expensive. Mack currently is on that team. He's fairly expensive. The Steelers, no, because they're technically Son's quarterback after this year, so they've got lots of space. But the Commanders have done an unbelievable
But that's what's going to just bring
job.
up the Commanders. Look what the Commanders are going to have the next few years, and they got a quarterback on a rookie deal, and they basically put together a rent-a-car team around him that they're not tied to at all, and they're playing the playoffs. So and they switched owners. They got switched owners, they switched management, and look what happened. So, boy, but we feel really good about beating the Packers last year, not 2023. That Packers win was so good, and the Commanders win, boy, that was worth it. Those
I
the
think
Colts thing matters. God damn it. Anyway,
I would not be surprised based on the way he talked about the space, and I think you're right. I got a feeling we're going veteran again. I already said that we're going veteran quarterback because you can move some of that money into the following years where we have more space, and you can free up more space as we go. There's guys that may be here, may not be here. Thibodeau's a big one. We could talk about that another time with size thing. What do you do with Thibodeau? What do you do with Neal? That's going to dictate cap space in the future years. But if you go veteran, and maybe 2 veterans, and then a rookie to be your developmental guy, you could draft them 3rd, 4th round. Then I think we might be trading back in this draft, not just to get players, but to lessen the value of that player money-wise, which is all slotted, but still, and picking up a few extra picks probably in the following year. So if we're trying to win now, it's going to be free agency that we go after a T. Higgins, somebody else to put opposite, maybe Neighbors,
right.
Or somebody at corner, as Cy suggested. That's a possibility, and a veteran quarterback. I think the draft is going to be a little more about just kind of accumulating. The Rams have been very great about getting guys in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds that become very good players. They eschewed 1st-round picks for a number of years. I could see us moving back to get that process there because we're spending money in free agency. And what will this remind you of? The offseason heading into 2016, where we went heavy defense, free agency, and we built a winner surprisingly out of nowhere because of that.
Yeah, this is going to go one of 2 ways, I think. We're either going to draft, right or wrong, we're going to either draft the quarterback in the 1st round, either trading up, trading down, or staying at the same place and having somebody fall into us. Or we're going to do what Cy's talking about, and we'll get into that later, but basically passing on the quarterback this year, maybe taking a shot at one in 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, but using that 1st pick on like a Carter, like you
absolutely,
and that might be the safer thing if you think Daboll's going to get fired next year. The only problem is you got to hope whoever free agent or trade that they make for the veteran isn't so costly that it ties their financial hands in the 2026. So we got stuck with Daniel Jones for 2 years because of the contract. Do you want to stick a new coach with a quarterback in 2026 that he doesn't really want? So that's where this whole self-preservation versus long-term thing comes in. There are going to be a lot of fans out there that are going to be pissed off at this whole discussion because you and I are already writing off the 2025 season. And I'm sorry to say that, but barring a miracle, Giants fans, the 2025 season is going to be as ugly as hell. And we got to think of it this way.
It depends.
Well, come on, think about this. You're talking about getting another defensive system in here now, a completely new defensive coordinator, new defensive system. You're probably going to and that means you're probably going to make other coaching changes too. And then you're going to talk about a new quarterback, and then you're going to have a new play caller if Daboll's going to have the play calls. Because I think Kafka's gone. So you're talking about again a big learning curve. It's almost like. But going into this year, I said we have the benefit of continuity, but we just changed 2.5 of our coordinators. We had a brand new special teams coach, we had a brand new defensive coordinator, and Kafka stayed, but he got demoted, even though he got a promotion in the title as assistant.
So I'll say this. Let me take the opposite side of this. Because I think some people think sometimes we just agree. I think it just works out that way. We didn't plan it that way.
That's why Gary wants to come on. He wants us to stop agreeing.
Yeah, he wants to be all different. So I'll be different because I actually think differently. But I'll ask you this question first, though. If the Giants fire Bowen and move up somebody else on the roster already there, so a Henderson or a Patterson, and they move them up and say, you're the defensive coordinator, do you still feel the same way? At least on the defensive side, that it's a huge learning
I
curve.
feel better from a continuity standpoint.
Okay.
Whether they can handle it, I don't know.
So,
but I don't know that. You know that when I listen to both those guys, they impress me, but that doesn't mean anything.
sure, but
So,
but I'm just going with your question on continuity.
yeah, but that would have that from a continuity standpoint, yes. But
wouldn't that theory have been in place coming off from the 21 season into 22? We got a brand new head coach, we got a brand new defense coordinator, we got a brand new offensive coordinator. We had all new, and the Giants won 9 games.
Right, but we had a really easy schedule. The schedule for 2025 is a nightmare. You're going to say don't
care about the schedule.
I know you don't, but that's a scary schedule. I mean, the teams are all the playoff teams.
But again,
no,
a number of those.
I know what you're saying, and we're going to agree to disagree on this. But the teams that are in the playoffs this year are going to be good next year.
Not necessarily. By the way, first off, we played Dallas, who's not good right now, and could be worse come next year. Washington has holes. They made the playoffs. Yes, they've got a quarterback. Yes, but we should have beaten them in the first game. If we had a real quarterback, we would have. If we had a kicker, goddamn it, we would.
I got to bring up the opponent list of opponents while you're talking. It's bad, John.
It is bad, but there's also so much is going to change for a number of those teams. There are a lot of those teams right now that if you look at the 25 offseason cap space, I believe we get the Saints. They're at the bottom of the hill of everything. They are, not only do they ultimately won't have a quarterback because they're moving on from Carr, they have the least amount, or better yet, they are the most over the cap as any team in there. They have such contracts that are so bad, it makes the Browns look good. Right. And the Browns are next. Do we play Seattle? Is Seattle on that
Let me
list?
see. All right, so I'm bringing up home games are Dallas. Philadelphia is going to be a nightmare still. Washington, I disagree with you because they have so much cap room now. They're going to be much better next year.
We'll see.
Green Bay, Kansas City, Chargers, Minnesota. The easy team is San Francisco, which is going to rebound. So the away games are actually a little easier, but we got to play Detroit. But the easy ones on that are Vegas and
we got Carolina. We have Carolina.
No, I don't think we played Carolina.
Oh no, we didn't. We were going to play Carolina, but they beat Atlanta. Yeah, right. Yeah. We got New Orleans.
So it's the home games are actually tougher than the road. Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent.
But my point is though. But my point is, it's just if you just focus on the Giants, right? Don't worry about who they're playing for the moment.
Right.
Change was going to happen no matter what. If you fired everybody and you brought in new coaches, they're not wiping the roster clean because you can only do so much. So they would have been saddled with a good portion of the players we have now. Daboll saddled with the players that he has now. A lot of them, you chose them specifically. You deal with it. So I don't have a problem changing the defensive coordinator. I don't think the scheme matters because, quite frankly, I think we tried to play a hybrid of Wink's scheme with Bowen, and guess what? Wink's scheme sucked the year before, and Bowen's was just tragically bad.
We interviewed Henderson last year, didn't we?
He was on the list of people that got interviewed, I believe. Yeah. Yes.
That's not a bad thought, John. So we may want to keep an eye on that.
Because I think that's your easiest way to go for your piece that you mentioned. Who are you going to get if you're worried about the head coach going? So stay in-house. That's the problem.
That's my fear right now. Because last year we got our third choice. It's going to be worse this year. So if you got a young hot guy, he's interviewing the 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. And the Giants is one of them, and Daboll's on the thinnest of thin ice. Again, Daboll's not just on thin ice; he's on the thinnest of ice right now. So what did John Mara said? John Mara said, I don't want to go back too far, but he said, "I'm going to have to be in a better mood this time next year than I am right now. It better not take too long because I've just about run out of patience." So again, he may be posturing again. We've heard
this from the guy who said we need to have patience and then said I'm out of patience. One thing we forgot to mention, so I don't mean to go back to Daboll, but it's important because we were just talking about the players. A question was asked of Daboll specifically. Some of the players felt that there was a lack of accountability with some of the young players, i.e. rookies.
Yeah.
And he kind of dodged it.
He didn't like that question.
Did you get a feeling that went with the rumor that you had heard that Neighbors kind of dogs it a little bit? Not dogs it. Didn't always go full effort. It's a good question. It didn't
pop into my mind when that happened. It's actually the first time I had heard that a reporter talk. Was that the first time you heard a reporter talk
That's
about
the first
that?
time I've heard a reporter, but
Yeah, I never saw.
I did hear Bobby Skinner bring it up about stuff he's heard from somebody that Neighbors doesn't go all out in practice.
Yeah, I missed something, or that was the first time I heard a reporter actually bring that up, because my first reaction was like, where's that coming from? So, but yeah, for those who don't know what John's asking, I had heard weeks ago, and I'm not sure I completely agree with this anymore, that Malik was kind of dogging it in practice. Because I don't think somebody who dogs it, I think Malik played hurt with a lot of different injuries down the stretch, and I give him credit for that. So what was the question he specifically asked? Wasn't
said a lack of
it, no,
no, it was
it wasn't
a lack
a
of
maturity.
it was a lack of
Accountability.
accountability.
That's what it was. It was accountability. So it
with the
wasn't
young players.
dogging it. Well, dogging it does get into accountability, though.
Because it was it was tied at the young rookies, So that seemed to me.
I thought about Deonte Banks immediately when they said that.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly, but see, they did kind of deal with him. They benched him. They didn't play him. They pulled him off.
But it didn't still register. I mean, so
that's true.
There were games where like he doesn't seem like, even Cy talked about in the last game, he thought he was making business decisions.
Oh yeah, I don't like the guy. When you don't try on a running play in a game where it's unbelievably important that you try. To me, you told me everything I need to know about you. I don't care whether you're winning or losing. That means your heart's not in this. You're not. And by the way, you get burned constantly. You have zero idea where the ball is. That's true.
Banks,
I forgot about
Banks
that.
is one of the most, and again, I'm not going to give up on him yet because I want to see what the new defensive coordinator does. But Deonte Banks, unquestionably, is one of the most disappointing players on the team this year. Speaking of disappointing players, Hyatt came up again.
I was just
he
going
has not given up on Hyatt. He's like me. Did you pick that up?
I did, but somebody's lying.
Somebody's lying?
Somebody's lying.
Why? What do you mean?
So the question was asked. So Hyatt. So basically, to catch up, because what you were just saying.
You want me to read the quote?
Shane was where Shane was asked about Hyatt.
Yeah, he said, I still have a lot of confidence in Jalen. Some of it comes down to his skill set, utilizing his skill set. He's a vertical guy that can take the top off and can run. He's an explosive playmaker. So part of that starts with getting somebody in here who can hopefully utilize his skill set. And then he went on and talked about what the offense would look like with Neighbors, Field Johnson, Tracy. He said getting the right quarterback to work with them. So he seemed to be throwing the quarterback under the bus.
So back it up. Go back one question before that.
Yeah.
On the transcript. Go back to the question.
I didn't print out the whole transcript.
Oh, okay. So
I printed out the ones
that's fine. My fault. I know what it is. So the lead-in was, we talked to Jalen earlier. Jalen indicated that he wasn't very happy with his play, and about being here next year, he said, we'll see.
Yes.
They asked Shane. Shane goes, well, wait a minute. Are you talking about, because I talked to Hyatt, Jalen afterwards. He's getting a thing done, so Daboll and I couldn't meet with him. So I'm assuming he's having surgery or something.
They threw Darius in there too.
What he said was, that he was answering a question asked to him about Slayton, if Slayton's not here and blah, blah, blah. I went back and watched the Hyatt interview. That's not completely true. The question was asked, if Darius isn't here, do you expect to be the guy to take his place? You'll be the one to be getting those plays. He goes, I don't know.
Well, that's an honest answer though.
But then they said, then they asked him about, your use of your usage here. Do you think it's right, or or a change of scenery? He's like, we'll see. He said, we'll see to a change of scenery. He did not say, we'll see if you're the guy who's going to replace Slayton. He was very unhappy with how he was being used. He said things here are bad. When they said, oh, well, did you, it's been announced that Shane and Daboll are coming back. He's, oh, yeah, good for them.
Yeah.
So Hyatt's not a happy camper.
No, and I don't expect him to be. All right, I know people are going to think that I'm a cheerleader for Jalen Hyatt. This is going to sound very giant-like. I don't give up on talent, and I think Jalen has been not used the right way. I do. Now, that sounds like Daniel Jones. I'm going out on a limb on this. I'm the one who's going out on a limb on this. I don't think he has been used the right way, and if I was Jalen, I would be pissed. I would personally be pissed because I'd
Sure.
be like, what? Why am I sitting on the bench on a team that can't score any points? Now, Giants fans are going to go out there and look and say, you can't play through press coverage. You're not
Sure.
a physical guy,
He is not.
and you've dropped some passes that you probably should have come up with. Now, I don't think his hands are a problem. I've said that repeatedly. I actually think he has natural hands. Um, I do think they have not been using him the right way, though. And that's kind of what Shane was saying. And so there may be a disconnect here between Shane. This may be one of the areas where there's a disconnect between Shane and Daboll on this. Because clearly the coaches don't feel the same way that Shane is doing. Because it's not just a matter of not having the right quarterback. Hyatt hasn't even been on the field. They're not even putting him on the field to have the opportunity to be with the wrong quarterback there. So I know I'm going out on a limb on this, and I've said this earlier. If they get rid of Jalen Hyatt, he's one of those players that I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on and has a better career someplace else, because I do not think they've used him the right way. I know now. That being said, he has his limitations, and I don't think he's a complete stud. I don't think he's an all-around receiver, but there is a role for a guy that can blow the top off the defense. And that's what Joe Shane was talking about. He was saying if you team with Neighbors and Theo Johnson, and you've got someone who can, they got to back off on, then Theo Johnson's got a lot, and Tracy have a lot of room to work underneath routes, because the safety's got to back off on the Hyatt. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and you're not wrong, but I'll say this first. You and I were talking about different shows that maybe we could take clips from and funny little things for other shows where we put them in the front. Jalen Hyatt to me is the John Raffio of the Giants right at the moment. He might as well be talking about how successful Entertainment 720 is to how much success he's had on the field. Okay. He's like,
you mentioned the show for those who don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, it's for Parks and Rec. If you don't know,
so,
you need to look it up and look up Entertainment 720. Oh my God. All I picture with I was going to say John Raphael. All I picture with Jalen Hyatt is the video from, I believe it was like the combine workouts.
Where he was bragging
to the Cowboys coach who talked about you're the type of receiver. He goes, well, what type am I? No, coach, what type of receiver am I? The arrogance that he gave there. At first, you thought, you know what? Good for you, young man. Don't be labeled. Now I'm going, that coach was probably 100% right. You are a one-trick pony. You are run down the field. Unfortunately, you're a guy who could catch a pass from Jeff George, but instead we put Tommy Maddox back there. So we didn't have a chance to get it to you. But you do have to beat coverage. You do need to do something on the field before you can start giving attitude in a way that says, the Giants, if you were really doing stuff, you would have been on the field.
Okay, now let me play your role here and say you're 100% right, and Jalen Hyatt is probably going to end up being a bust, and probably a bad bust because they traded up for him. So say you're right, but this disconnect again with Shane. Shane says mea culpa, I'm to blame, but he won't. And when he asks for specifics, he won't admit to the specifics. So he won't say Jalen Hyatt was a mistake. He won't say Daniel Jones was a mistake. And he talked about, we like to go back. I'm still learning, and I'm go back and
there was that
where we're making mistakes. But when some people don't like being told you made a mistake. I'm not going to say anyone in my house, but when you tell them you did something wrong, some people get pissed off, and they don't take that very well. And it's a natural reaction, but so it's different when you say specifically admit to the mistake than it is when you say, "Oh, I make mistakes." And that's kind of what I got the impression with Shane is when they pressed him on stuff. Let me see if there's any last thing. I don't know.
Well, because with that, I want to real quick though. Right. You brought it up, so I want to ask you. Yeah. You've mentioned more than once what he said about the Daniel Jones thing. He was pressed on it, and he said, based on what we had at the time. Now, what he said, but what he said more specifically was coming off a playoff run. So for all of you who have said that Viking thing, it played a role.
It was huge. It was a determining factor. But
I do think, though, that they came down to the two pieces. I've said it over and over again, and I know I can take it to my grave, I guess. I think the Barkley thing played a much bigger role in it. And again, you can dummy up the contract to a quarterback much easier than you can to a running back. And Barkley was not going to take bullshit dollars. Every dollar was going to be very specific, and it was going to be probably guaranteed. He wanted to make sure he was going to get paid. Jones, I think, loved the fact that he's got this huge ass contract, even if it worked out to only be in 2 years. Ultimately, for him, he got to throw his name up there with all those other quarterbacks with the contracts. But we all said it from day one. This is a 2-year deal. If he screws up, he's gone.
There's a tie-in with your club. Was it 721?
720. No, 720.
He's got the money. So
that's right. He's like, I'm flush with cash, baby.
Yeah, he said there were 2 times it came up. He said, we made a decision with Daniel after the playoff run. So there you go. Yeah. The way we structured the contract was we were going to do the best we can to try to surround him with weapons, upgrade the offensive line, which we did this year, and see how far we could go with Daniel.
That's key, that last part. See how far we could go.
Yes. Unfortunately, it did not work out, but at the same time, our hands are not tied behind our back. Financially, we're in good shape. We're in a good cap situation. We have draft capital to make changes. But he earlier had said, we also had to be conscious of what we may have on the horizon at quarterback, working on parallel tracks. I thought that was the big phrase, parallel tracks. So they had 2 plans. Daniel might pan out, Daniel might not pan out. So we're sitting here with $40 million in cap space and on $100 million the following year. So he didn't finish the parallel tracks thing because he couldn't, but he was basically saying, we have a plan in place in case Daniel didn't, and that's what was in Hard Knocks too. That's the vibe we got.
Oh, absolutely.
And he confirmed it. And then later on, what pissed me off was again, this is the thing. We wouldn't change what we did with Daniel, given what we knew then. We wouldn't change it. What bothers me about that is, one, just come out and say if we had to do it all over again, we would have done it differently. That's the honest answer.
But I think he said the process, though. With the process we had, we would have done based on what they had. Now,
but that's stupid because then the process is wrong. That the thing is, I sorry to interrupt, but I just want to finish.
No, I've interrupted you.
What bothers me about this is it's draft picks. When you're doing draft picks and doing scouting, it's very difficult to know what a player is going to be like because it's hard to change from college to pros. You don't know what the work habits are going to be like. You don't know how they'll deal with the New York City area, all these things. Bill Walsh wrote a whole book on why rookies are rookies and why they fail.
Right.
It's a fantastic read. They had Daniel Jones under their thumb for a full year. They knew what he could and couldn't do. They had to change their offense because of him. They knew what he couldn't do, and they still misjudged him. That's what bothers me. So I can understand mistakes happening, and mistakes are always going to happen, even when you do have players on your roster. But that was a monumental mistake, and it's why they're in the situation they're in, and we all know it. It's the elephant in the room,
sure.
And they don't want to address it, either out of pride or out of this thing that they want to protect Daniel's ego still. I don't know what it is, but or they're just stubborn, or they just don't want to. But that's what bothers me. Just say let me put it this way. Wouldn't you feel much better right now if they had come out and said, we messed up. We know we messed up and we're going to try to fix it, but we messed up in the 2023 offseason. That screwed us up. And if we had to do it all over again, we would have done it differently. And we apologize for that. I'd feel so much better if they'd done that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a psychological standpoint, I get it.
Because you're admitting to it.
No, I mean, for you. You as a generic fan, me as a fan. Yeah. Yes, I get that. Could you do me a favor on what you just read? Could you read it again? Just the part about the contract, very specifically where he starts talking about the contract right away. It's something about 2 years.
Oh, yes. We made a decision with Daniel after the playoff run. The way we structured the contract was we were going to do the best we can to surround him with weapons, upgrade the offensive line, which we did this year. And then he goes and talks about the cap situation this year. Is that what you mean? Or...
No, right before it, he said specifically 2 years.
The parallel tracks. We're sitting here with $40 million cap dollars?
No. I thought right in the beginning, didn't he say we did basically a 2-year deal?
Oh, he did, but I don't have that part.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you did it from memory. That to me is very telling. They knew They knew that they were only doing 2 years. So this goes back to the summer when I said he's gone no matter what, and you said I don't know about that, and I kept thinking,
Oh, I
no,
don't think he would have been gone if he played well this year. If
no,
he played
I
this well,
do.
he'd be here. I think.
No, I think he, unless he threw 35 touchdown passes, which he's never done anything like that anyway. I think they knew they.
Why? So say
This-
they got to the wild card this year. What's the difference between them giving him the 160 million in 2023 and them keeping the contract at this point? So I don't think they would have gotten.
Well, no, because I think
he admitted it. I think the parallel tracks thing admits it.
Well, that
They
part's
said
it
if he
too,
played
but-
well, they would have kept him.
But they didn't say that though. What they said is we will go as far as we can go with him. See, we keep forgetting that the roster was pretty shitty. So they still were trying to fill in more players on the roster, and they were hoping, I think, that they could just keep Daniel, and if you gave him a little bit more, maybe you could get 23 touchdown passes instead of 15. But then he looked so horrifically bad in 23 that they were like, holy shit. But they couldn't get out of it. But they had the year, they knew they had one more year. He didn't even make it the full 2 years. So I'm not giving him credit for giving him the dumbass contract, but I am thinking though that I think you can read the writing on the wall here that the contract was framed in such a way for Daboll and Schoen to get out of it. It got them what Mara wanted to have happen, which is one of those 2 guys had to get a contract and the other guy couldn't leave. So you flip them either way. I don't care whether it's Barkley, Jones, who gets the contract, who gets the franchise. They wanted to keep that group intact. Is what Mara wanted.
That gets back, and then we should cut this short, but that gets back to you and I thinking we know something that we don't really know.
Right. We can't know.
We think that Mara put his thumb on the scale on this, but we don't really know. Now, that's the other big picture thing here. If Mara in 2023 mandated that those guys came back, then you can kind of understand why he would bring them back this year because he's at fault ultimately.
Right.
But if they signed off on it and they agreed with him, then no. But if Mara, there might be a guilt factor here. If Mara did, but we will never know that. We'll never know that true. That we don't know if Mara tied their hands behind their backs or not. We just don't know. Or if they just went along with it, or they're the ones who went to Mara. The worst case scenario for them would be is they convinced. I don't think that's what happened, but if they convinced Mara, because I think Mara felt for whatever reason, I guess goes back to we've done everything we could possibly do to screw this guy up, and I don't want to lose Barkley. I think we know that Mara.
I mean, I think the deal was done with Schoen. I think the rumors that you heard and other people have heard about that was already done. The only reason you meet with Daboll before that last game of the season is because you're trying to decide that come Monday, what are you going to do? Right. And in some ways, I'm going to give Mara credit if that is true, because he wanted to hear stuff from Daboll before the game. If you wait for the game to decide, a game in which, in the back of your mind, whether you tell everybody you wanted to win or not, in the back of your mind, you're okay if we lose and stay right at the top of the draft pick because it's the last game of the season. Right. It means nothing. If you were going to use that as your deciding factor, you're more lost at this thing than I thought.
Well, so and I'll go one up on you. I've said they should have done that even earlier because I said in the last show, I said if you were going, they should have had this conversation weeks ago because nothing that happened in the last couple of games, 2 or 3 games, should have decided the fate. And they should have told Daboll that he was going to be safe or not before, because that would have affected how he coached these games.
Well, the second you went DeVito, and then you went Locke, and then you went back to Locke again, you decide, okay, we're going to stay with Locke. At this point, you've thrown shit right out the window. That meeting should have happened then. Certainly should have happened after Locke throws the 2 pick sixes against the Falcons and you get embarrassed. At this point, there's just a couple of games left. What are we trying to do here now? Winning means absolutely nothing at this point. What are we trying to do?
Know why did they play Locke at the end of the year when DeVito got healthy again? I still don't even understand that because Locke's not going to be here next year. I hope he's not here next year.
I wonder if they were
maybe he will be back. I don't know, but
I wonder if they were actually worried that DeVito brings a bit more of an energy.
I thought about that
to the crowd, to the team, to the.
but remember, Daboll supposedly doesn't know he's coming back, so he wants the win. So in Daboll, if we're accepting, the one thing I will say too is we're taking everything, some of this at face value. Everybody could be lying.
Oh, sure, there could be.
So I'm sure some of this is lying because there's contradictions and all that. So we don't even know if the decision, like I think it happened, but we don't even know really if the meeting happened on Friday. We're assuming the meeting happened on Friday.
I think Shane's demeanor, like you said, right? Yeah. His demeanor was one way, and Daboll's was completely different.
Yeah,
those two guys are they were on a different track back.
And that's why I wonder if there's tension between them now. More tension, not like they're not. I'm not talking about George Young, Bill Parcells tension. I'm talking about they were buddy before, and I'm wondering right now if
let there be. Maybe it'll make you a coach better.
Yeah. So interesting to me is I want to see Brian Daboll have a better attitude next year, dealing with the press, dealing with his team. He's having more fight in him because he looks like a beaten down guy to me. I wouldn't be upset if he put on weight again. And it just doesn't seem like the same guy to me anymore. He just seems so beaten down. And I know, and people are gonna say, well, 14 losses will do that. He would look beaten down when they were 2-5. He just doesn't seem like the same guy to me.
Well, if the pounds equate to victories, I say hit a buffet.
Start eating Big Macs.
It's like just go for it, dude.
Yeah. I come over to my house right now with the holidays. I got to stop. So anyway.
I was at a Giants preseason game against the Patriots a number of years ago. In the preseason game, it was in New England. So I was sitting with a crowd, and there was a handoff to Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. I don't know if you remember Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. He was running back with the Patriots, and he got tackled like literally a half a yard from the end zone. And I don't know why I said it because it was kind of funny at the moment. Like I was surrounded by Patriots fans. I'm like, oh man, if he had one more last name, he would have scored. And I was like so many people were like, just like laugh. I was like, I thought it was funny, but I didn't think it was hysterical. But now I'm wondering about Daboll. If we got to fatten that dude up for some wins, it's like Santa Claus. Get that guy some cookies.
He's running out of energy. He doesn't have enough energy in him. He's getting too beaten down. So anyway, all right, let's wrap this up. So that was my take on this. The big picture thing is they all came out separately. It was kind of weird. Bring them out one at a time in succession on the same day.
And in an odd order, too.
Yeah, and it seemed like, and at the end, they finally got the table out for Shane. So it looked a little more formal.
Yeah, Daboll got a podium. He got this little spot. And they asked him, they're like, why isn't Joe Shane out here with you? And he's like, he'll be in after. His attitude did not seem great about it.
He didn't seem happy about a lot of things. Yeah. It was like, I read the transcript first and I thought, did he come off as bad as he's coming off in the train?
Right. But he did actually.
It's like, oh my goodness. You should be kind of kissing your lucky stars here or whatever. Thanking your lucky stars here. So
we'll be ending this now, but before we do the next one, because we don't know when we're going to do the next one, do you expect to see any changes to the staff? Or at least do we expect to start hearing something? Or is it going to drag out?
That's a great question. I would have hope we start hearing something soon. The problem is there's a bunch of teams putting together coaching staffs right now. And so if you're a coach out there, do you want to go with the Giants who have a lame duck coach? And again, I'm getting real big 1996 vibes with this, with Dan Reeves' final lame duck year. Do you want to go into that mess, or do you want to go into something where you're a little more secure? Because remember, these guys got families. So you're talking about bringing your children with you and your wife to move to a new area, and you don't want to do that again a year from now. So that's why I wonder your idea, maybe sticking with somebody in house on defense might make sense. They might have to at that stage, unless they get like you said, the Cincy defensive coordinator who has ties here. But yeah, I expect to hear some changes. I just don't know when. And a lot of it, I think it's going to be tied to the other coaching situations around the NFL right now. How many coaches have gotten? Do you know off the top of your head? We've gotten fired.
Let's see. You've got New Orleans.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. New Orleans, the Jets, they're without. The Raiders are out.
And the Jets got screwed with Vrabel because I think Vrabel's probably
Patriots. That's
screwed with that. Yeah. See, Vrabel may
Oh, the
want.
Jaguars.
See, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants try to couch the getting rid of Bowen thing as we want to do him a favor and let him go back with Vrabel.
And
You know.
maybe that's actually what he wants too, and that'd be great for us because
Oh,
I
I
think
think well,
I think
you
it's a
want to get
bad
out of this
matchup.
situation. Look, the Giant Kafka doesn't want. I again, this is all speculation. I can't imagine Kafka wants to be here anymore.
Watch for Ken Dorsey. I expect Ken
Yeah,
Dorsey to
that
be
makes
added to
sense.
this staff.
Now,
Yep.
if Ken Dorsey is not in demand, which I don't think he would be, but if Ken
Yeah.
Dorsey, you got to get guys that aren't going to be in demand, high demand, because again, lame duck situation with Brian Daboll.
And it's also familiarity, right? Dorsey
Yes.
and Daboll work together.
Yep.
I don't care what you think of the guy as a coach. You say, oh, he didn't do that well here or there. We don't know that. All I do know is that when he was with Daboll, when they were with Buffalo, they were with Josh Allen. It was a cohesive unit with those guys. He knows what Daboll wants to do. And if
Well,
Daboll's going to give up play calling, who might he be willing to give it to? A guy who was already working with him because he's still technically the play caller
well,
by just passing.
then he want Dorsey in 2022. He didn't. He probably would have preferred Dorsey.
Dorsey took over for him in Buffalo as the offensive coordinator and got fired.
Right, but I think if he had his druthers, he would have had Dorsey come with him. Then I would think.
I totally agree. But they moved him up to offensive coordinator
to keep
for
him
the Bills,
from the Giants, probably.
to say in Buffalo. Absolutely,
Right. I think that's why they did it, is to keep him from going to the Giants.
Sure.
Because they had already lost their offensive line coach to us too. And they, so that didn't go over too, that didn't go over too well.
Didn't work out.
Anyways,
So
the good news for me is I don't have to revamp the entire coaching staff section of the website. So that's
nice.
That's the good thing.
Continuity,
and
baby.
I don't have to write a Daniel Jones write up for the first time in 6 years. I don't have to do a summary write up on Daniel Jones.
And he's on the active roster now for the Minnesota Vikings.
So.
But so watch because I don't think you and I will do another one the rest of this week. Maybe not. I don't.
Let's see. It depends on breaking news. We can do short ones on breaking news. And I think you had a good idea. We should ask Cy to come on and discuss his preliminary offseason thoughts on what the Giants should do. And he laid some of those out in his game review for the Giants-Philly game. At the bottom, he kind of gave his preliminary thoughts on what he thought the Giants should do at quarterback and other things. If you haven't seen it, read it because it's provocative. It'll get, some people will say, yeah, it makes sense. Other people will say, no, I don't want to do that. So read that. But I think it would be great to have him come on and sort of outline all of this. So.
Absolutely. So watch the playoffs this weekend. The quarterback landscape is really going to be determined on a couple things. And one of them is a game very specifically with the Vikings and the Rams. One of those teams that are going to take a quick exit out of the playoffs. Somebody's going to lose on Monday night. Whichever one that is, if it's the Rams, they've got some salary things that they need to deal with. They've got an older quarterback and a higher salary, and they were possibly looking to move on from him already during the season. They might be time for them to look and then want to move in a different direction. He could become available via trade or free agency. If they make a longer run in the playoffs, that changes it. The Vikings, the same thing. If Darnold takes the Vikings deep into the playoffs, they'll forget about the ghost game against the Lions where he looked really bad and may want to stick with him, keep that veteran piece, and then McCarthy becomes a trade piece for other teams. Again, think of what Shane said about the work they did on that draft class carries over. It's still a possibility that we might send trade picks to go get JJ McCarthy.
But they have to check out that knee.
Absolutely.
There's been 2 surgeries on that knee already. So,
so that's 2 teams that are really going to control. One of the veterans is going to either be let go free, which is Darnold's currently going to be a free agent, or they'll re-sign him, or somebody's going to get cut or traded. That would be Stafford. So depends on what happens.
See, I'm more excited about the offseason. I'm getting it's just a new life of Giants fans. We're like the old Washington Commander Redskins. They win the offseason but lose. That's who we are now. But I'm excited about the offseason, free agency, the draft, and we'll see. I just hope Mara's instincts are correct here. Yeah, he said
the good thing about this offseason is we're going to find out very quickly truly what their process is, what they might have wanted to do. If they immediately go get a veteran, and it's not just a low tier guy, if they go get a guy who's known and they feel like if he was on our team, we would have done better, and they stock up in some other areas to make that happen, I think we're going to spend some money free agency probably on weapons, either like a T. Higgins to play opposite Neighbors, definitely a corner, and then use the draft for what it's really supposed to be for, really filling your team, not just one superstar, and then hopefully you get maybe another player. Fill your team.
The thing is the free agency is going to probably telegraph what they're going to do in the draft. And that's generally the case anyways, but especially this year. So if they don't do much in free agency at quarterback, they're going to draft a quarterback high.
Well, yeah, you don't have a choice.
They spend bucks or trade for a veteran that expects to play, they'll probably draft a quarterback in a later round in the draft. Like, and when I say later, it doesn't mean to be late in the draft. It could be second, even as high as a second round. Remember, the Giants are going to be picking at the top of the second round. They have the second pick in the second round, I think now, second or the third pick in that. And so they'll be able,
I think it goes 3-2-1.
Yeah, so they'll be able to, they could even trade back into the first round if they want to. And, that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. Assuming Cam Ward's gone, I think the Giants would probably be better off right now taking somebody like Carter, like you were talking
Absolutely.
about. I know a lot of people, and we'll talk about this later, but the Hunter guy scares me a little bit for the reason.
It doesn't do it for me.
Anyway, and I like to have a pass rush there too. Mason Graham interests me, but that's really high for a defensive tackle. So we'll talk about this later.
We'll talk about it. So we want to wrap it up. But for those of you who are all pissed off because I mentioned Aaron Rodgers earlier, the Giants quarterbacks over the last 2 years combined have thrown 30 touchdown passes. Aaron Rodgers threw 28 this year. So I'm thinking, don't just throw them out of there just because you don't like them. Our options are limited. We need to keep every
they got to get a quarterback
on board.
They got to get a quarterback, and none of the answers out there are great. If we put every quarterback option out there, there would be nothing that's terribly popular, and that's the horrible situation we're in right now.
But if you want Jameis Winston, you shouldn't be shitting on possibly having Aaron Rodgers. It's like, But that being said, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment. I know I'm trying to pay more attention again back to the comments, to comment back. I was doing it a lot. I've been super busy between work and this. So, and I know right now Eric's getting the signal, probably telling him he's late for dinner. I know.
No, I'm actually looking at the time. We went way long again.
We went way long. I'm way late on mine. So that being said, I love doing the show. If we have breaking news, we'll do it, but you'll certainly hear from us again next week. But until then, appreciate it, and we'll catch you down the line.